Minister, distinguished guests, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this symposium for inviting us. At the CDB, we deem this to be a very important and potentially enormous initiative as the government of Jamaica tries to increase its growth rate beyond what has been sort of recognized, almost accepted, unfortunately, as a growth ceiling of around 2%. My presentation will examine a number of issues related to the inclusion of the Logistics Hub initiative as part of Jamaica's overall growth strategy. I will look briefly at Jamaica's recent growth experience, and then I'll look at the medium-term strategy. Mr. Bullock talked about it in detail. I'll mention it very briefly. I will also examine the current trends in global trade that makes this initiative important and potentially impactful. And I'll discuss the essence of logistics and its competitiveness dimensions. I will also look at what these competitiveness dimensions imply for Jamaica's policy framework going forward. And finally, I'll talk briefly about the economic impact, the potential economic impact of the initiative, and mention some funding issues as well. Now, for the last decade, since 2004, real GDP growth in Jamaica averaged about 0.2%, and that compares with 2% among CDB's other borrowing member countries, 18 of them, 3% in other small island developing states, that is those SIDS other than the regional SIDS, and by way of comparison, 6% in Singapore, which is pretty much being regarded as the model that Jamaica is trying to follow in relation to the logistics hub development. I think one of the other panelists mentioned some of the reasons for this, the growth experience that has been observed in Jamaica over the last 10 years, and these include migration of skilled labor, vulnerability to natural disasters, citizen insecurity, or crime, as well as some competitiveness issues. This morning, I think someone mentioned the difficulty of getting matters through the court system. That's a competitiveness issue. There are infrastructure deficits, and there are things like the length of time to obtain permits and services. But I'd like to point out that cities like Singapore have been, for the most part, far more resilient since 2009, since the onset of the Great Recession, having growth rates on average about 2 percentage points higher than those in the Caribbean, and this is probably reflected in the fact that in some of those higher growing SIDS, there's greater diversification. So I just thought it'd be useful to strike that comparison. The target rate of growth included in the medium-term social and economic framework calls for a growth rate of about 5% per year by 2015. And the strategy includes objectives related to asset mobilization, specifically capital market development and issues of accessing credit, which Jamaican businesses have identified as a constraining factor in doing business. Then there's improving competitiveness generally, which covers aspects of competitiveness such as infrastructure development, tax reform, customs reform, and human resource development. one component of the strategy is also the strengthening of business networks and value chains, essentially trying to facilitate the development of various types of clusters, including vertical and horizontal clusters, building resilience to natural disasters and the impact of climate change to reduce the impact of disruptions on production and productivity. And finally, promoting social protection so that the gains of development are shared and those vulnerable to adverse effects are protected. Now, growth is very critical to addressing some of the issues that have already been mentioned on this podium, debt and some of the social issues. And we don't anticipate, I don't think we anticipate that growth may reach the 5% threshold that is targeted, but we do expect that, that growth is certainly on the increase in Jamaica. Now, world markets have opened up since the elimination of barriers to trade in the 1990s, and this has resulted in globalization of supply chains where firms set up in countries that meet their profit maximization needs. In fact, world trade has grown by 6% per year over the last 4 decades compared with GDP growth of 3.4%. So the share of trade in relation to GDP has increased from 20% in 1971 to 51% in 2010, according to the World Trade Organization. And the Panama Canal expansion potentially increases regional trade volumes. And the supply chain possibilities potentially increase for the region as a whole. And Jamaica, given its geographical location, is certainly positioned to benefit significantly from this expansion in trade, as Professor Shirley alluded to in more detail this morning. I have here a definition for logistics. According to the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, they define logistics as that part of the supply chain management that plans, implements, and controls the efficient and effective forward and reverse flow and storage of goods, services, and related information between the point of origin and the point of consumption in order to meet the customer's requirements. So we have another definition to add to the few that we have had so far today. But more importantly, what are the main factors that defines a country's logistics competitiveness, if you like? Logistics and the competitiveness dimensions thereof extend beyond infrastructure. I know we've talked a lot about infrastructure, and the focus has been on infrastructure, but it is the competitiveness, the logistics competitiveness of a country goes beyond the infrastructure aspect. And in fact, there are broadly 4 areas that are accepted as the main dimensions of logistics competitiveness. And these were mentioned this morning as well. There's the whole notion of market access, which is about the tariff and non-tariff measures that might disadvantage foreign firms. These can be quotas, phytosanitary requirements, and so on. There's border administration, which includes the efficiency of customs administration, the efficiency of import-export requirements, such as coordination among other trade-related agencies, and the transparency of border administration as well. And then there's the ever-important transportation and communication infrastructure, which includes not only the coastal ports, airports, inland facilities, and the road network, but it also includes the existence of a good telecommunications infrastructure as well that facilitates electronic processing and tracking of shipments. And finally, there's the business environment, including regulation and security. And this includes the time it takes to get construction permits, protect property rights, enforce contracts, obtain electricity, and it also includes the impact of crime. Again, the whole notion of the business environment was discussed this morning as well. Now, the World Bank constructed an index which tries to put these things together and rate them and rank them and score them, specifically across 6 criteria, which captures the 4 elements that I mentioned before. And they compiled an index that was based on assessments by 1,000 international freight forwarders. The criteria are the efficiency of the clearance process, the quality of trade and transport-related infrastructure, again, ports, roads, information technology, and so on, the ease of arranging competitively priced shipments, the competence and quality of logistics services, such as transport operators, customs brokers, and so on, and the ability to track and trace consignments, and the frequency with which shipments reach the consignee within the scheduled or expected delivery time. And this index ranked 155 countries, I think. Jamaica ranks 124th on this index. The performance shows that Jamaica needs to improve its performance in all areas, but especially in services such as customs, brokers, and transportation. And essentially, this is not intended to cast aspersions, but to sort of, take a look at what, where we are going in relation to the logistics hub initiative, and where some of the focus needs to be from the policy level. So that's the current state. Hopefully, in a few years, we'll be much better placed. So within that context, what does Jamaica need to do? Well, as I said, it ranks 124th of 155 countries, and its score was about 45.3% of Singapore's score, which is the, if you like, the top performer across the globe. So the Logistics Hub initiative is really intended to reduce these supply chain barriers over time and get that score much closer to international standards. As I sort of said already, infrastructure is important, but it is only one dimension of logistics, so that you have to concentrate as well on a number of other areas. In fact, the Logistics Hub initiative has to be, and in fact is, about a comprehensive approach to increasing competitiveness, focusing and exploiting opportunities for supply chain management. So this is recognized by the government, that this is a comprehensive strategy that includes not only infrastructure, but as was said here already, some of the softer and just as important issues related to logistics. So I'll skip that slide. So if things go as planned, and we expect them to, what is the likely impact of the Logistics Hub initiative? Well, the expectation is that this will result in reduced costs to trading firms, thus reducing costs to consumers and producers. We also expect that transshipment and supply chain opportunities will result from the upgrade in the logistics infrastructure. Okay, so you would have, in addition to enhancing your logistics infrastructure, or rather as a result of that, you're going to hopefully have entities being established in Jamaica as part of a set of global supply chains. We're also expecting, of course, an increase in GDP. In fact, there was a study done by the World Economic Forum, a report entitled Enabling Trade and Valuing Global Opportunities, which estimated that if all countries reduced their supply chain barriers halfway towards global best practice in the two key areas of border administration and infrastructure, global GDP could climb by 5% and trade could increase by 15%. And that point was already made in a different way this morning. Of course, the impact will be uneven, but the important message is that the reduction in supply chain barriers that is currently occurring in the region generally, and especially in Jamaica, will have important impacts for the Jamaican economy. Cost competitiveness would improve. Jamaica would benefit from the increased trend towards global supply chains. This would have a positive impact on GDP, and depending on the elasticity of employment would increase. And of course, there would also be the existence of the emergence of higher paying jobs in the numerous logistics opportunities that would, entities that would come on stream. Now, funding, in terms of funding the Logistics Hub initiative, the point was already made that Jamaica is a highly indebted country, and therefore there are limits to which the government can now fund an initiative such as this through borrowing on its own. So a lot of it will depend, as you already know, on private sector participation, including through public-private partnerships. Of course, the multilateral development banks still stand ready to assist to the extent that they can and to the extent that is necessary and reasonable. But in relation to the softer issues, there's also a significant role for the MDBs and other agencies such as the IMF, CARTAC, UNCTAD, and so on, to aid the government of Jamaica in addressing some of these softer issues, customs administration, tax reform, and these things are already happening. From the perspective of CDB, we are currently in the process of developing a collaborative strategy for the usage of resource envelope that we have for Jamaica with the Planning Institute of Jamaica as the coordinator and the rest of the government. It's not a large envelope, but the focus will be on, among other things, technical and vocational education and training, which will be a critical factor in facilitating the achievement of the objectives that the government of Jamaica has set itself in relation to the Logistics Hub initiative. So we certainly stand ready to assist in that regard. And thank you very much for your attention.